From Mel Hertz, author of Still Here, this is See You in Manila, Episode 2.
We flew back to Manila the next morning. By the time we landed, Boracay already felt farther away than it should have. 1 minute you were barefoot on an island, still finding sand in places sand had no business being. And an hour later, you were back in Manila traffic. I had forgotten some things about the city. The heat, I remembered. The noise, mostly. The traffic apparently required fresh trauma every visit. I was staring out the window when Enzo leaned forward from the seat beside me. "You okay? We've moved 12 feet in 10 minutes. That's actually pretty good." I looked at him. He smiled. "I hate you." "You've mentioned that." I had a little over a week before my flight back to San Francisco. I'd see relatives, get some work done, maybe recover from eating, like I had personally been assigned to support the Boracay restaurant industry. And enough time, apparently, to stop thinking about Andi. That part should have been easy. I had known her less than a week. We hadn't kissed. We hadn't even exchanged anything resembling a promise. Worse, we didn't even have each other's phone numbers. Boracay had ended. That was usually what I was good at. The ending. 2 days later, Enzo called while I was answering emails. "We're having dinner tonight," he said. "Who's we?" "People. You know most of them." I kept typing. "Where?" "BGC. What time?" 7:30. "Okay." Another pause. "Andi's coming," he said, much too casually. My hands stopped over the keyboard, only for a second. "Okay? That's it? What else would you like?" "I don't know. A noise." "I'm hanging up." He laughed. "Try not to be there at 6. At 7:25 I arrived, because growth was possible. The restaurant was on the ground floor of a building in BGC, all glass walls and warm lighting. Enzo was already there. I made sure he saw me check my watch. He ignored me. 2 of the women from Boracay arrived a few minutes later. Andi came in just after them. And for one completely unnecessary second, everything else disappeared. This was not Boracay Andi. Her long hair fell straight over her shoulders, one side tucked behind her ear. She wore black tailored trousers, a cream blouse, and heels, with a dark jacket over one arm and a laptop bag over her shoulder. She looked up from her phone. Her eyes found mine, and she smiled. Great. Apparently, professional Andi was another thing I had to deal with. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She glanced at my face. "You look different. No sunscreen?" She gave me a half smile. "That must be it. Same Andi." "Good." Her phone rang before she opened the menu. "Sorry, work." She stepped away. Enzo looked at me. "Don't." I didn't say anything. Your face did. A few minutes later, Andi returned. "Everything okay?" one of her friends asked. "Someone moved a presentation to tomorrow morning. Apparently that became my problem." Enzo shrugged. "That is unfortunately part of being a vice president." I looked at Enzo. He nodded. Andi caught the exchange. "Wow, impressive," was all I could say. She smiled. "It's just a title." I shook my head. "Very modest group you have here." Andi went back to her menu like we were discussing nothing more interesting than appetizers. The title itself didn't matter that much. I did pretty well for myself. Corporate job titles weren't exactly foreign territory. But 27, already a vice president, and somehow she'd managed to spend nearly a week in Boracay without making it sound important. That part I noticed. In Boracay, I had seen Andi barefoot on the beach, laughing with her friends, carrying her sandals, making sure everyone got back to the hotel. Here, I saw the other part. The woman who took calls during dinner because somebody needed an answer. I liked this one too, which was becoming a problem. The next morning, I was at a coffee shop in Makati before 6:30 for my East Coast clients. The glamorous life of a digital nomad. By 7:15, I had already reviewed 3 design changes and argued against a navigation update nobody had tested properly. I was finishing my call when somebody stopped beside my table. I looked up. Andi. She was dressed for work again, in dark trousers and a pale blue blouse, her laptop bag over one shoulder and coffee in one hand. She smelled like she had just stepped out of the shower, fresh citrus shampoo, a light floral perfume, and coffee. My brain, which had been functioning perfectly well 30 seconds earlier, briefly stopped being useful. Apparently, Andi Salazar, first thing in the morning, was also a problem. She pointed toward my screen. Very serious. I held up one finger. Give me a minute. I turned back to the call. No, I'm not saying we shouldn't change it. I'm saying we should know what problem we're solving before we change it. I listened for a moment. That's fine. Send me the latest version, and I'll mark it up before you start tomorrow. A few minutes later, I closed my laptop. You sound different when you work, Andi said. How? Serious. She smiled. You're good at what you do. That stopped me for a second. There was no teasing in her voice. Thank you. I looked at the coffee in front of her. Are you meeting someone? You. I blinked. Enzo told me you were working here this morning. He said you'd probably finish around 7:30. I checked the time. 7:28. You came here to have coffee with me? I was already nearby. How nearby? She took a sip. BGC. That is an entire city district. Very observant. I smiled. She smiled back. Neither of us said anything for a moment. I thought about asking her to dinner. Then, unfortunately, I thought about Enzo. Andi doesn't do casual. He hadn't told me to stay away from her. Not exactly. He had told me not to start something unless I meant it. The sensible thing would have been to finish my coffee and let her go to work. Instead, I said, "Can we have dinner tonight?" Andi looked at me over the rim of her cup. Is that you asking me out? I was working up to it. You need more work. I laughed. Is that a no? I have a meeting that could run late. She took a sip of her coffee. I'm free Thursday. Thursday it is then. I unlocked my phone and handed it to her. Can I have your number, please? If that's okay? Andi smiled as she took the phone. She typed it in and handed it back. I'll ring you so you can save mine. We'll figure out the time before then, Andi said. Okay. Our first dinner alone lasted a little over 2 hours. I chose the restaurant. Andi chose the time. Apparently, this was how negotiations worked. She arrived directly from work and somehow still looked spectacular. We talked about work while we ate. She told me about a campaign her team had been working on for months, and I told her a little about the UX projects keeping me busy while I was in Manila. When Andi talked about her work, she changed. She became more animated, more specific. Her hands moved when she explained something, and I could hear how much she cared about getting it right. I liked watching that happen. At some point, Andi looked at me. I just realized I don't know your last name. Alvarez. Jess Alvarez. Jessica Alvarez, technically. Her eyebrows lifted. Jessica? Government forms, my mother when she's mad. That's about it. Andi smiled. Jessica? I looked at her. Don't get comfortable. Her smile widened. A little later, I noticed something at the corner of Andi's mouth. You have something. Where? I pointed. Here. My eyes stayed on her mouth a second longer than necessary. Andi noticed. A little color rose into her cheeks. She wiped it away. Gone? Yeah. She smiled. So did I. Her phone buzzed near the end of dinner. Everything okay? My dad has a follow-up tomorrow and she can't find some paperwork. I need to stop by their place. Tonight? She needs it. No complaint, just fact. I watched her for a second. What? You really do show up for everybody. They're my family. I know. When the check came, I paid. She noticed immediately. Jess, I could pay for my own dinner. I know. You didn't need to pay for me. I know that too. Then why did you? Because I asked you to dinner. Andi gave me a look. That's very old-fashioned. I know. She tried not to smile. I smiled. Don't. I didn't say anything. Your face did. I stood. Go find your father's paperwork. Over the next several days, seeing Andi required planning. This was new. She had meetings, deadlines, family, friends, a life that had been running perfectly well before I showed up in it. So I adjusted. Coffee before work, dinner after late meetings, a walk through BGC when she had an hour. Once, I waited almost 40 minutes in the lobby of her office building because her meeting ran long. If it wasn't Andi, I would have left after 20 and never called again. Instead, I answered emails. Nobody died. When she finally came downstairs, she looked apologetic. I'm sorry. It's okay. You waited. That's generally how waiting works. She smiled. I thought you hated waiting. I contain multitudes. She laughed. That was becoming one of my favorite sounds in Manila. On a Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed while I was brushing my teeth. A message from Andi. Marilog. I stared at it, then typed back. Good morning to you too, I texted back. 3 dots appeared. Do you know what it means? Obviously. What does it mean? Andi replied. I put my toothbrush down and started typing. I don't like being tested before coffee. Before I could send it, another message appeared. Grade 4. I laughed and Googled it. Beautiful. I stared at the screen, then at her message. Wait. Are you calling me good-looking? I texted. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I'm teaching you Tagalog vocabulary. I smiled. That wasn't my question. I texted back. This time she didn't answer, which, frankly, felt like an answer. I laughed out loud, then stopped. I was standing alone in a bathroom, smiling at my phone like an idiot. At some point during the week, she was starting our conversations almost as often as I was. Nothing important. A picture of terrible traffic, a complaint about a meeting, a photo of coffee with a message asking if mine was better. Once, just after midnight, she sent, Still working? I am. We ended up messaging for almost an hour. Somewhere in the middle of it, she asked, Do you ever miss home? I thought about that. Then I replied, Which one? The 3 dots appeared. Exactly, Andi replied. That was the strange part. I had dated women I found attractive, women I had fun with, women I had wanted. But with Andi, I kept wanting the parts that normally came later. The ordinary conversations, what she ate for lunch, whether her meeting went well, why she didn't like salmon, the small things. My flight to San Francisco was scheduled for Friday. By Wednesday, I was beginning to have objections. I moved it to Tuesday. 4 days. Not a life decision. Barely an inconvenience. That evening, Enzo stopped by the hotel. You changed your flight. Why do you know everything? You told my mother you'd still be here Sunday for lunch. I should have known better. Why? He asked. I want more time with everybody. Everybody? I pointed at him. Whatever you're thinking, stop. You're thinking loudly. He laughed. I ignored him. The next night, Andi and I had dinner after work. We were walking toward her car when she glanced at me. "You're leaving tomorrow, right?" I was. She slowed. Was? I changed my flight. To when? Tuesday. Andi studied my face. Why? 4 extra days suddenly felt much larger. I wasn't ready to go yet. She looked at me for another second, then smiled. Small, almost private. Okay. That was it. No teasing, no asking what I meant. Probably good, because I wasn't ready to explain it either. We started walking again, our shoulders brushing. Neither of us moved away. Then Tuesday came. I did not leave. This surprised absolutely nobody except the airline, which charged me accordingly. I changed my flight again. 3 weeks this time. 4 extra days had been easy to explain. 3 weeks was something else. I told myself work was going well from Manila. True. I told myself I hadn't seen some of my relatives enough. Also true. Then I stopped examining my reasons too closely. I'd also moved into a small apartment for the rest of my stay. A few days later, I was picking up a few things for it before meeting Enzo for lunch. Hangers, laundry detergent, a couple of kitchen things. He spotted me outside the store and looked at the bags, then at me. "You bought hangers." "I'm evolving." "You changed your flight, got an apartment, and bought hangers." "Why are you making the hangers emotional?" He laughed. "You really like her." I didn't answer right away. That was enough to make him stop laughing. We moved away from the crowd. "I do," I said. "This is different." "How?" I looked out over the floor below us, where people moved between stores carrying bags, completely unaware that my cousin had apparently decided this was the place where I needed to discuss my feelings. I've liked women before, but I always knew there was an ending. I knew I was leaving. They knew I was leaving. It made everything simple. And Andi? I thought about waiting 40 minutes in a lobby and not minding, about wanting to know how her presentation went, about 4 days becoming 3 weeks. "I don't want to think about the ending yet." Enzo nodded. "That sounds different." "Yeah." "Does she know?" "No." "You should probably tell her." "I just told you, that's enough emotional honesty for one day." He laughed. Then his expression softened. "If you're telling me this is different, I believe you." That landed harder than I expected. "Thanks, cuz." He looked at the hangers again. Still disturbing. "Go away." Andi suggested a Saturday trip to Tagaytay while we were having coffee after work. "I'm free Saturday." "So am I." "I know." Of course she did. By 6:30 Saturday morning, I was downstairs waiting. At 6:38, Andi pulled up. I looked at my watch before I got into the car, then at her. 8 minutes. "Good morning, Jess. You're late." "I almost drove away when I saw you checking your watch." "That would have been difficult. You just arrived." She put the car in gear. "You're already annoying. You invited me. I'm reconsidering." She was smiling when she said it. Traffic leaving Manila made 8 minutes seem increasingly irrelevant. By the time we reached Tagaytay, the air had changed. Cooler, breezier. After weeks of Manila heat, I stepped out of the car and stood there for a second. Andi walked around from the driver's side. "You okay?" "I can breathe." "You could breathe in Manila. Technically." She laughed. We spent most of the morning doing very little. Coffee. Walking. Stopping somewhere because the view was good, then staying longer than we planned. Eventually, we found a place along the ridge where we could see Taal Lake stretching below us and the volcano sitting in the distance. I hadn't remembered it being that beautiful. Maybe I hadn't been old enough to appreciate it, or maybe the woman standing beside me had something to do with it. Andi rested her hands against the railing. The wind kept blowing her hair across her face. She gathered it with one hand and pulled it over her left shoulder. I smiled. She caught me. What? Nothing. You keep saying that. Because sometimes it's true. And sometimes? I looked at her. She held my gaze. Sometimes I'm protecting myself. Andi laughed softly. We stayed there for another moment, looking out at the lake. This was one of my dad's favorite places, she said. You came here with him? A lot when I was younger. She smiled faintly, then looked back toward the lake. My family used to have money. My dad had a successful business, but he got sick while I was in college. He couldn't work the way he used to, and eventually the business collapsed. I stayed quiet. I watched my parents go from not worrying about money to worrying about everything. Bills, medicine, the house. She rubbed her thumb against the railing. I hated not knowing what was going to disappear next. Something clicked into place. Her job, her schedule, the way she planned everything, and maybe the way she looked at me whenever I talked about not knowing where I'd be 3 months from now. The wind moved her hair again. A strand caught near her mouth, and before I thought too much about it, I moved it aside. My fingers brushed her cheek. Andi went still. So did I. Her eyes dropped to my mouth. I started to lean in. Andi didn't move away. For 1 second, I thought this was it. Then someone behind us called loudly for a family picture. We both looked toward the sound. Andi started laughing. I let out a breath. Of course. She looked at me. You were going to kiss me. That's very confident of you. You were. You don't know that. Andi smiled. I do know. Then she walked toward the car. Are we just leaving that there? Yes. That feels cruel. Come on, Jess, she called over her shoulder, laughing. I followed her, because apparently I had no dignity left. On the drive back, the conversation wandered into the things we somehow hadn't asked each other yet. Andi had been openly gay since college. She'd had one boyfriend her freshman year. After that, she never dated another man. But college wasn't where it started. She had girl crushes. 2 girlfriends at her all-girls high school. I found myself wishing I'd known her back then. It was after 9 by the time we got back to Manila. After a few minutes, I realized we weren't heading toward my apartment. Did you miss a turn? No. Before I could ask anything else, she turned into the driveway of a building and parked. I looked at her. Where are we? My place. My heart started beating faster. Seriously? I'd been in this situation before, more than once. So why was I suddenly nervous? You want coffee? Coffee? I glanced at the building, then back at her. Yes, Jessica, coffee. I swallowed. I like coffee. To be continued.